Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Evan with PodPeak, and in this video, I'm going to show you the 10 things I love about Mixbus 6. Let's dive in. So I'm going to get this out of the way right away so there's no confusion. I am a dedicated Reaper user. It's my DAW of choice. I'm not going to stop using Reaper anytime soon because it's how I make a living. It's kind of my core program. But there's some things that I really dig about Mixbus, and especially Mixbus 6, which I just upgraded to, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. So let's get into it. Number one, affordability. Mixbus 6 costs $89, and that's a great price for a fully featured DAW that, in addition to being able to do most things other DAWs can do, it also sounds awesome. And we'll talk more about that throughout this tutorial. I will say this too, I'm running Mixbus on a Mac, and so far it's performed really well. It's been reliable and stable. It also loads up super quick, and so far I've only had one crash, which happened when I was initially scanning my plugins, which may or may not be a problem, but this is a video about the things I love about Mixbus, so let's move on. Number two, simplicity. Mixbus is built to work like an actual Harrison mixing console. Now, this might seem daunting and confusing at first, but there's some real advantages to working this way. For example, it forces you to think about your signal flow, and it gives you a step-by-step way to control the volume and color of your audio, which in my view makes it an intuitive way to work. Another bonus of the console layout is that it teaches the fundamentals of working on a mixing console. For example, if you do any live performance or ever think you might want to get into mixing live sound for bands, well, this would be a great place to start. Number three, gain staging. I love the fact that each strip or channel in Mixbus 6 has its own dedicated trim knob, which can be a real time saver. For example, in Reaper, I have to install trim plugins to do my gain staging. Even though I have a template built to insert these tracks quickly, it's still an advantage, in my view, to have them on each strip in Mixbus. Now, I'm using Mixbus primarily for mixing, so when I import my tracks, rather than having to install a trim plugin on every channel, I can just hit play and start adjusting my tracks to get good levels before I even touch my faders. This is a great way to get control of your tracks before you start mixing, and it starts the process of controlling your tracks and levels in a methodical way, which will give your mixes more headroom and make them sound fuller and punchier when it's all said and done. Number four, the channel strip. In my view, this is one of the best features in Mixbus 6. Each strip or channel in Mixbus has a killer 3-band EQ and a very nice compressor section. Now let's admit it, when we mix songs, we always use EQ and compression plugins. The beauty of Mixbus is that it's already there, so you can instantly start tweaking and sculpting your sound without having to bother with inserting plugins. It's fast, it's intuitive, and they sound great. Let's go over the EQ first. So these are console-style EQs in that they have fixed frequency ranges with a gain knob to increase or decrease the gain by 15 dB. The low and high bands are shelving type EQ, and the mid band is a peak type EQ. You can initiate the EQ by pressing this button. Let's go over the three bands. This is the low band with a frequency range from 40 Hz to 400 Hz. You can see as I sweep the knob back and forth, the values show up in the readout, a handy feature for dialing things in. Now as I move up to the mid and high bands, you'll see there's some crossover in the frequency ranges, which of course can be dialed in to taste. The mid band goes from 200 Hz to 4000 Hz, high band goes from 800 Hz to 15,000 Hz. Finally, you have a high pass filter for cutting out low end rumble. I wouldn't call these EQs surgical, but they do a great job of cutting or boosting problematic or pleasing frequencies, and can certainly add a bit of flavor to the tracks. Okay, let's move on to the compressors. Again, what I love about these compressors is the simplicity of using them. You have three modes to choose from: leveler, which can be viewed as more of light compression; compressor, which can be viewed as more of an all-around compression style; and limiter, which is the most aggressive type of compression. So to initiate the compressor, just press this button. You can choose your compression mode and then start dialing it in. This small fader is your threshold. As you adjust it, you can see the gain reduction here. Any makeup gain can be adjusted with this knob. A few things to keep in mind when using the different modes. For the leveler, this dial adjusts the attack. For the compressor, it changes the ratio. And for the limiter, it becomes a release dial. So this is the channel strip in Mixbus 6, and in my view, it's definitely one of the best features. Number 5, grouping. So obviously, every DAW worth anything has a grouping feature. Grouping allows you to bundle certain functions together so that when you adjust one setting on one channel, it affects those same parameters in every other channel in the group. For instance, if all my drums are in a group and I move the fader on one channel, it affects all the faders in that group. Pretty cool. But what I love about how Mixbus creates groups is, again, the simplicity. For comparison, when you pull up the grouping dialog in Reaper, there's so many options and tick boxes, it could be overwhelming to wrap your mind around it at first. But with Mixbus, you literally just draw a line across the tracks you want to group, select the parameters you want to control, and boom, you're done. I'm sure there's other DAWs that work this way or something similar, but if there isn't, then well done, Mixbus, because this is an awesome feature. Some other quick grouping features. To recolor the group color, just right-click on the group bar. From here, you can also disable the groups, and you can also do that by clicking on the bar. Click on it again to re-enable. And one other useful feature is that if you want to adjust just one fader in the group without disabling the whole group, just hold the Shift key and drag to your heart's delight. Now, another reason you might want to use groups has to do with the next thing on my list, and that's number 6, the mix buses. Next to the channel strips, I consider the mix buses to be the standout feature of Mixbus 6. Mixbus has 8 mix buses that you can send channels or groups to. And again, what I love about the mix buses is how simple they are to use. To route a channel or group to a mix bus, just choose the mix bus you want to send to. You can then rename the mix bus by right-clicking, and that name will then be reflected on all the tracks being sent to that mix bus. Once tracks are sent to a mix bus, global adjustments can be made like volume, panning, and more. Each mix bus has a saturation knob, which gives you that Harrison console sound. You can also initiate EQ and compression, which works more or less the way it does on the channel strips, albeit a little more simply. One other thing to keep in mind about the mix buses, if you want to use a mix bus as an effect send or for parallel compression, leave this master button on. But if you want to use the mix bus as a proper bus, then make sure to turn this button off. That way, the channels or groups will be sent to the mix bus where you can add processing, then from there, it will flow to the master bus. I hope that makes sense. All right, number 7 on the list of things I love about Mixbus 6 is saturation. Again, this is something that makes Mixbus different from most other DAWs out there, in that each Mixbus and the master bus both have saturation knobs. This allows you to dial in that Harrison console color. You can either go subtle or extreme depending on your taste. And again, the thing I love about this is just the pure simplicity and convenience. For example, I use the Sonomus Britson channel as a saturation and gain staging plugin in Reaper all the time, but I have to manually add this in each time I want to use it, which takes time. Of course, I could make a template or create a custom shortcut to achieve that quicker, but that's beside the point. I just love the fact that you don't have to bring up a plugin to get saturation in Mixbus. And by the way, the saturation in Mixbus sounds really good. Number 8 on the list is the monitoring section. So I just thought this was cool because Reaper doesn't have a dedicated monitoring section, and I think this could be really useful for certain things. For example, you can assign a listening level for monitoring or for your control room that is separate and won't affect the actual mix. It also has a bunch of convenient features like global mute, solo, dim, as well as auditioning your mix in mono. And finally, you can insert plugins on the strip which can be used for room EQ or corrective measures. And these plugins only affect the listening path, not the main mix, which is pretty awesome. So if you're mixing without a dedicated monitoring system or you don't have an audio interface that has some of these features, this monitoring section in Mixbus 6 might be really convenient for you. All right, so number 9 on my list is track management. Now again, every professional DAW should have some sort of track management system. For example, in Reaper, The track manager is used to show or hide tracks in the track control panel or the mixer. You can also mute, solo, lock tracks, and bypass effects in the track manager. This is a feature that I use a ton in Reaper. That said, I really like the track management feature in Mixbus 6. You can toggle the track manager, or as Mixbus calls it, the editor list, by hitting Shift L. Here you can show or hide tracks, mute, solo, etc. You can also show your Mixbuses in the edit window, which can be helpful. There's also a number of other tabs for session management, including sources, regions, snapshots, tracks and bus groups, and ranges and marks. But one of my favorite track management features in Mixbus applies specifically to the actual Mixbuses, and the feature is called Spill. For example, let's say I've got a ton of tracks, but I want to focus specifically on my drum tracks, but still hear the other tracks during playback. I just hit the Spill button on the drum bus, and boom, it hides all the other tracks and just shows my drum tracks. Now, this isn't a deal breaker for me. I'm assuming some other DAWs out there have a similar function, but this is definitely a feature in Mixbus 6 that I love. And finally, number 10, customization. All right, so coming from Reaper, which is by far the most customizable DAW on the market, I had low expectations about how customizable Mixbus would be. That said, I've been pleasantly surprised. For example, I've been able to customize all of my main key commands that I use in Reaper to function similarly in Mixbus. And this is a huge deal when moving from DAW to DAW because you don't have to get caught up in learning new key commands, which helps you work faster. To customize key commands, you basically just pull up the keyboard shortcuts window, select the action you want to change or assign a key command to, give it a key binding, and hit return. To remove a key command, just find the action you want to change and hit remove. I still haven't got things completely dialed in, and I think it'll take some time to get things sorted, but just after spending an hour or so customizing things, I'm pretty much able to run a session in Mixbus and feel like I can navigate and move around really fast, which is awesome. So in conclusion, will I be switching to Mixbus 6 full-time anytime soon? Absolutely not. But there's some certain applications that I definitely think I'm going to use it for. For instance, certain types of genres of music might be more suited to work in Mixbus because of the sound of that actual Harrison console. But what I think I'm going to use Mixbus more for is mixing stems that I export out of Reaper. If I want to take, 4 or 5 stems from a song and kind of give them that analog color, kind of glue things together, that's where I think Mixbus is really going to shine for me. And here's a bonus tip. If you work in Pro Tools, Mixbus actually has like an integrated system to import a Pro Tools session directly into Mixbus so you can do your mixing in Mixbus. So you can do your editing in Pro Tools and then use the import feature on Mixbus to bring it into Mixbus, get that Harrison console sound, and export from there. Harrison actually has a really good YouTube tutorial on how to do that, and I'll leave that in the show notes below. Final thoughts? I think Harrison Mixbus 6 is awesome, and the fact that you can purchase it for essentially less than what a high-quality plugin would cost, I kind of think it's a no-brainer. All right, so that's it for today's video. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel, and if you have comments about the video or anything that I went over, please leave those below. All right, we'll see you guys next time I put out a video. We'll talk to you soon. Peace out.